If you're interested in supporting the channel, there are two things you can do. Flipside Gaming is offering a 10% discount for any order $10 or more if you use the promo code VOIDMAGE on their website. That is VOIDMAGE in all caps. I will also have an affiliate link to tcgplayer.com. If you use that link, any purchase you make on that website will go towards supporting the channel. I appreciate the support. Also hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Hello everyone, just having fun here, bringing you another top 10 video. This time I'm going to go over the 10 best win cons in the Commander format. Sometimes it is just a one card win, sometimes it's a little bit more involving than that. But these are just ways to win the game aside from just combat damage, which takes much longer. These are alternate win cons. And these of course vary. Some people don't play competitive EDH, so if you see some cards on here that you've never played against, that's probably why. I like to start off my top 10 videos with honorable mentions. Approach of the Second Sun is a pretty cool card. It is a one card win con, but you do have to be able to cast it a second time. There are ways to make that easier, but I think it is pretty cool to have a win con in white. You're going to notice that most of the win cons fall within Sultai colors. In the Genesis Wave and Villainous Wealth, the idea that if you put a bunch of mana into it, your reward should be a ton of permanents, a ton of cards from your opponent's deck or your deck, depending on the card. Doesn't always win you the game, but most of the time it's going to put you in the best position to do so. And Doomsday is kind of a win con that leads into other win cons. You can make the argument that just because it doesn't technically win you the game, it's not considered a win con, but if you're able to make it so that the 5 cards in your library are the best possible cards to help you win, this would definitely be considered a win con. Not something you see a lot of. There are some Xur Doomsday decks. So, onto the list. Number 10 is Enter the Infinite, and you could toss in Omniscience along with it, but you could play Enter the Infinite with any kind of infinite mana combo, or just anything that can provide you with a bunch of mana, and it's usually going to win you the game by drawing you your entire library, which will then allow you to win the game pretty easily. You could either play your whole deck, or go for the Laboratory Maniac win, but the idea here is that drawing your entire library should set you up pretty well. It's kind of hard to have any excuses when you have all the cards you could possibly need. Much lower on the list because it is very dependent on the setup. It's hard to just play Enter the Infinite without any other way to cheat in spells, so it usually gets paired up with Omniscience. And then number 9 is Exsanguinate, but also a nod to Debt to the Deathless and Grey Merchant of Asphodel, because they do very similar things. Exsanguinate was one of the first X-costed black spells that actually did this, and it was just crazy. You're hitting each opponent, and you're gaining that much life lost total. It's kind of like the Genesis Wave Villainous Wealth argument, though. It's a win con if you have plenty of mana, but I feel like more often than not, this is meant to just put you in a very good position. They're not the most competitive cards, but these do see a ton of play throughout casual Commander. There's a bunch of life gain decks, so these really get the job done if you're looking for win cons. And it is very fitting because the next card, number 8, is Torment of Hailfire. The more you put into X, the deadlier the outcome is going to be. This is a card that, again, it's taken off. A lot of people play it in Commander. And although it doesn't really provide you with any sort of life gain, it does what Black really wants to do and pile on the punishment. You're not just losing life this time, you're going to force them to discard, to sacrifice permanents. If your opponents survive an Exsanguinate, they at least have their permanents, they have their hand. If they survive a Torment of Hailfire, their hand's probably empty, most of their non-land permanents are gone, and their life total's probably really low. That does not allow them to come back. So even if it doesn't technically win you the game on the spot, it really shouldn't take you more than another turn to finish them off, which is why I think it's a much more effective win con. Number 7 is Mikaeus the Unhallowed and Triskelion / Walking Ballista. The card here to focus on is obviously Mikaeus the Unhallowed, because the whole mechanic of bringing the creatures back with +1/+1 counters is why these combos work, because once you're done pinging your opponents, the creatures shouldn't have any more +1/+1 counters on them, so they come back. You're able to do it again because the way Undying works is that they get +1/+1 counters if they didn't have one before, which means you could send your opponents that infinite damage. This is a much more casual win con, although it does see some play in competitive EDH. I feel like if you're looking for a mono black win con, or just anything that synergizes with +1/+1 counters, Mikaeus the Unhallowed could be a flavorful win con, but just a very powerful presence in the format, and has been one of the better black creatures you can play with. Number 6 is Ad Nauseam. Now we're talking about more competitive win cons. Ad Nauseam is often paired with something like Angel's Grace. Even if you don't, in most competitive EDH decks, the CMC is pretty low, and you have a bunch of fast mana, so after you do this, you should be able to win the game, even if you have under 10 life. Now, compared to Doomsday, I would say Ad Nauseam doesn't just lead you into one kind of win con, like a Laboratory Maniac. You could of course go with anything else your deck is capable of, so you're not just limited to one thing, whereas I feel like with Doomsday, more often than not, you're going to pick the exact same 5 cards every single game, not really changing the experience at all. Overall though, Ad Nauseam is one of my favorite cards because it's black at its best. You're giving up life for more cards, and we see this all the time with things like Necropotence and Dark Confidant. Just a very powerful card, and it does make your deck a lot more competitive. And then number 5, we have one of the last casual EDH win cons, Craterhoof Behemoth. If you're playing green at all, if you're playing any kind of creature-based deck, Craterhoof Behemoth has often been considered one of the better win cons, because all you have to do is ETB, and all of your creatures get a ton of power and toughness until end of turn. Craterhoof itself has haste, so you're going to be swinging with a ton of power, while also giving all those creatures trample. 8 mana being totally worth it in a format where you should be able to get even more than that. There are ways to blink it, ways to bring it back from the graveyard, abusing it all over again. This is why blink decks are so popular, because we have a ton of powerful ETBs like Craterhoof Behemoth, and just being able to swing all of your creatures at your opponents. It may not kill all of them, because often you do have to deal with 340 life totals, so that could be a lot of damage you have to deal. You should be able to at least kill off 2 opponents, but definitely a well-known win con. I know I said earlier this is a list of alternate win cons, and though it is technically combat damage, I think a lot of people would consider a Craterhoof ETB to be an alternate win con. Number 4 is Aether Flux Reservoir. Now this sees play mostly in casual EDH, but there are some lower tier competitive EDH decks built mostly around Storm that will abuse the heck out of Aether Flux Reservoir. Some pretty budget ones too. There are Joyro Weatherlight Captain decks, where the whole deck just plays cheap zero-costed artifacts, build up that storm count, and then force your opponents to lose a bunch of life. It's good in artifact decks because it happens to be an artifact. Spellslinger decks are capable of getting a bunch of cantrips going. 4 mana artifact that's super flexible, you can fit it into just about every deck. Definitely a force to be reckoned with in many playgroups. In the number 3, we have some of the big win cons now. Fu Chain. Whether it's Prosh, whether it's Zigana, General Tazri, the new Niv Mizzet, Fu Chain always seems to have some kind of powerful presence in Commander, allowing you to abuse your commanders by being able to recast them from the command zone. All you have to do is generate infinite mana off of this. Once you have that infinite mana, you can only use it on creatures, which is fine because you just recast your commander over and over again. It's just so powerful because it's not like there's only one commander that works well with it. There are a ton. It just dominates no matter where you put it. Which brings us to the next card here, number 2, Protean Hulk. Now, unlike Fu Chain, Protean Hulk doesn't need that much of a setup. I mean, every win con could use some protection, but Protean Hulk is pretty easy to get off. All you really have to do is play something like Flash, or really just have any way to ensure that Protean Hulk dies, because there are a whole bunch of ways that you can then combo off, and it usually involves something like a Karmic Guide, so that you can bring back Protean Hulk, kill it off with a Viscera Seer, get a Kiki Jiki, and then do some crazy stuff. You could also use Mikaeus the Unhallowed and Walking Ballista. The card is just ridiculous. And the good thing about this card is that it doesn't just dominate everywhere you put it. Casual EDH decks are not going to be any more powerful with a Protean Hulk than they were with an Aether Flux Reservoir or a Paradox Engine. I don't believe it has that kind of negative impact, but it most certainly dominates in competitive EDH, and Breakfast Hulk has been one of the top tier decks for a while now. Just a lot of flexibility in what you're able to actually retrieve with a Protean Hulk. I know a lot of people have been negative, but it's had most of its impact in competitive EDH, and it really isn't out of control. I mean, there are decks like Fu Chain that compete pretty well with Protean Hulk, and most competitive EDH decks share the same control shell, so very rarely do you ever just see a deck in competitive EDH just go off uncontested. And then we have the number 1 card, the number 1 win con, I believe, because it's also in casual EDH, not just in competitive, Laboratory Maniac. I think everybody knows about this card. It doesn't really do anything special. It's just a 3-mana creature with a condition, and that's it. It actually makes many win cons even better. Things like Ad Nauseam, especially Doomsday. I mean, there's so many reasons why people would want to play a Laboratory Maniac, but even alongside Protean Hulk, even alongside Food Chain, you also see Laboratory Maniac in a lot of these decks. It is the ultimate win con, and many times it just requires a demonic consultation, so while it's not super involving, Laboratory Maniac is the ultimate win condition because it sees play everywhere, and it's usually been one of the more dominant win cons because many decks that use it build their entire deck around efficiently drawing cards, getting to things like Enter the Infinite, just good solid control. Now the Jayce Planeswalker that also has this condition, yeah, that's a thing, but Laboratory Maniac, it's easier to get out there. It's a 3-mana creature, which means if you really wanted to, you could search it with something like Protean Hulk. Much harder to get a Planeswalker out there. But Laboratory Maniac is just fantastic. It's everything you need. Even in decks with other primary win cons, you still see this, and that says something. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed these 10 win cons. You see them all the time in Commander. You all have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.